single is sometimes has its own problems that Muslims are trying to confront. So anyway, I was having this conversation with a young brother who is looking to get married, inshallah, and we were just talking about some of the realities of the hardships that we face out there. So we know we live in a very sexualized society, that everywhere you go, everything you look at, is constantly pushing this instinct, this sexual instinct that we have to the forefront of our kind of thinking. And I won't even say that it's thinking that we have, because when you have an emotion such as powerful as that driving you in society, it's a very dangerous kind of society to create, because people are not really kind of using other faculties, but rather that faculty becomes the most powerful faculty in your life that dictates what you do and how you behave and why you do certain things. And this really, is a concern for us as Muslims, of course, as well, because we are supposed to be chaste and we're supposed to protect ourselves from such kind of illicit relationships. Now, on the other flip side, Islam does not make it haram for you to have relationships, but rather it gives you it regulates that relationship. It gives you a very clear method of how to address that instinct that you have, rather unlike a very animalistic kind of perspective where you can do what you want to do, to who you want to do, when you want to do. SubhanAllah, that's the kind of society that we have, that tells you that whatever your desires are, you have a freedom to express that desire. So if you have a longingness for a relationship with a man, by all means. And if it's two men together, you can fulfill that wish, because we're living in a liberal society. We're living in a sexually free society. So if you have that kind of desire, then you should fulfill that. SubhanAllah, only yesterday I was with my family in the car. We were driving through our city of Bradford, and I seen two men from the corner of my eye holding hands very openly, very confidently walking down the street, very proud of the fact that they are, who they are, and they're, being, holding hands the way they were. It was setting this example, almost like a married couple would do. A married couple that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with, walking down the street, they would embrace each other and hold each other's hands in this manner. But these two men were doing that in that manner. And my wife said to me, I said, one of them might be blind, he might have an issue with his eyesight. And I was looking at him thinking, you know what, I think you need to look beyond that, because it doesn't look to me like that individual's blind. To me, it looks like they're making a very clear statement. So, SubhanAllah, this is the issue of morality, the issue of where morality comes from, who defines morality. Because when man defines morality, this is subject to change. It's subject to many things, to many trends out there. What was unacceptable, 50 years ago is suddenly acceptable today, and 50 years from now, what will be acceptable then? So the thing is, man does not have the capacity to determine what right and wrong is. We can see that, constantly over the years, that criteria has changed. From something being, not accepted to being accepted, to being embraced now, to, a constitution of marriage that was, looked highly upon, to now it not even being recognized in society. You talk to the older generation, and they recognize the importance of marriage and the sanctity of marriage. And today, what you find, it's funny, I had a conversation with a colleague of mine, and he was talking about his own relationship with his own wife current, and he says that, Asif, I've known my wife for 17 years, but for 13 years we weren't married. And I says, why didn't you get married? He says, I didn't want the commitment. SubhanAllah, you ask yourself that you've been together for 13 years, that's a commitment in its own right, and you're saying to me you didn't want to marry because it's a commitment. Obviously, I guess we have to look at it from the very source of our kind of belief, from a belief point of view. For us as Muslims, for us to be in a relationship, it has to be a halal relationship. We can't just spend time with a partner because we want to have, we want to fulfill this need of having a companion, or having a female partner with us, or for a female having a male partner. Rather we seek to get married to fulfill that need. And fundamentally, that is what we are trying to fulfill, because as human beings, we have instinctual needs. We have a need for reverence. There's an instinct of reverence within every human being, that the human being likes to look up to something, wants to admire and recognize something. Whether you find it in the format of Hollywood stars, Bollywood stars, whether they're celebrities in sports, in football, in snooker, in bodybuilding, but everybody has somebody to look up to. That is obviously, to me, is the instinct of reverence, the instinct of worship. Now, whether you want to say that, well, we don't worship these individuals, but you can see the kind of time people spend following certain people, emulating them, wanting to be like them, ascribing to their kind of blueprint to life. So when you say, look, you're not worshipping people, what is the definition of worship? Just because we as Muslims, we prostrate 5 times a day and we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the thing about worship manifests itself in different ways in different people. So, by following people, by admiring them, but I would say it goes beyond admiration. I admire many people. I look up to many people, but when you start to worship them, you start to emulate them, you start to change your clothes according to them, you start to change your hairstyles according to them, you start to, emulate their lifestyle, the way they live and what they do and how they sort of like, how they kind of function in society. This is a form of worship. This is obvious and it's something that needs to be, addressed. So, we have that instinct and Islam addresses that. It's given us a very clear guideline to how to address the issue of worship. So we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have the salahs that we pray, we have the month of Ramadan, we have the Hajj, there are many things that we can do to fulfill that need which exists within us. Of course, then you have the procreational instinct, which again is something that, needs to be fulfilled. And how does general society do it? They do it the way they want to do it. If they want to have a one-night stand with somebody, they'll do that. If they see somebody that they have taken a fancy to, they'll pursue them. There'll be no commitment there, but they'll want to have that kind of desire exercised. They want to fulfill that lustful desire that they have, and to them it's about fulfillment. It's not about obedience. So their desires, have become God. Their desires are dictating to them, how they need to function, how they need to behave. So it's very common you find amongst the young generation that there are very high testosterone levels, very testosterone driven, young men, their hormones are all over the place, young women. And this is a grave problem that we have in modern day societies, that how do we curb and how do we manage these kind of relationships? Because even in schools, it's thrusted in your face. We all remember being in school and how, we all, had a thing about a certain person or what have you in a school, whether it be a boy or a girl. But that was always on your mind. That was something that occupied most of your time. Having this and finding that and the whole concept of, losing your virginity. These were kind of things that are pushed in your mind all the time. And unfortunately, the Muslim community has embraced these kind of corrupt ideas, these erroneous ideas that are not from Islam. And this is the danger where, popular culture around you, it naturally affects your personality, affects your behavior, affects your thinking. Your peer peer gatherings, your social gatherings, they affect what you do, how you behave, what you think, what you want to do. So it's a difficult struggle that we have as Muslims in this community. Even as an adult, we face our own issues as well. We are faced with many challenges that we have. Alhamdulillah, we are susceptible to them just like anybody else. So this is a time-old challenge that we have as Muslims, and I think this is something that there's a famous saying by one of the scholars, and I can't quote it word for word, but it goes on to say that those who kind of like liberation is not those that who it's something to do with your desires. Your desires have become your God. Your desires have become something that control you. But the one who controls their desires, he's the one who's liberated. That he doesn't act upon these instincts, doesn't react upon these emotions. Rather, he is the one who not subdues them, but he manages them. He controls them. He is the liberated one. He is like the king. And the one who is oppressed is the one who is submitting to these emotions, submitting to these desires, submitting to these whims that say to him that, these lustful desires that go into their mind and they've got to pursue. And the beauty is that Islam recognizes that. Islam doesn't say that you've got to be celibate. Islam doesn't say that you can't have relationships with women. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to men that marry 1, marry 2, marry 3, marry 4. Yeah, make it halal. That's the key point that we need to remember from Islam, that we don't just kind of like, jump into bed with anybody and we don't have a legal relationship with this individual. Rather, Islam came to regulate these affairs, regulate these relationships. So, now going back to the point at hand that we were discussing, that how do we protect ourselves? How do we safeguard ourselves from being exposed to these situations? Because it's a difficult one. I myself, growing up in the society, now being a mature man in my 40s with my children, I have the similar challenges that I've got to address, I have to face. So it's about safeguarding. And I think the beautiful thing is that Islam has set a very clear criteria to safeguard yourself. Being that, when you're out in society, there are certain codes of conduct, there's certain things that we should sort of like adhere to. Being alone with a woman that is not your wife, your mother, your sister, is something that we need to be cautious about. We don't want to be in that situation. Rather, there should be a third person there to protect him and keep ourselves from falling into that trap. Even in situations you shouldn't be going out and socializing in a free mixing environment, because it's natural that being in a free mixed environment that you're going to get affected. You're going to see women are going to see men, and there's emotions that are going to start running around. Shaitan is going to start whispering in our ears, and it happens to us all. And no man can stand here and say that I can walk into a room full of women and it doesn't affect me. It does affect you. This is the fitrah of man. This is the nature of man, and it's the nature of the woman that she has her shortcomings and desires as well. So it's about how we regulate these emotions and these relationships. And we see in modern day societies the rise of rape crimes, the rise of sexual abuse, domestic violence. You see pornography is widespread throughout society. It's become completely kind of like out of control. I don't want to go into this detailed discussion about this, because there's so much gory information that you come across that, subhanAllah, makes your stomach churn when you think about it. But there are people that have been inflicted with these illnesses that are in society that they can't get themselves out of, and it's a very unfortunate climate that we live in, and they're left to their own devices to carry on, and they may have their own wives, they may have their own children, but yet this kind of like this pursuit that they have is not something they can control, and it's very unfortunate that we live in a society like that. But going back to the point at hand, is that as a father, I would encourage my children to marry young. And you might think to yourself, well, what is young? To the age of understanding, to the age of adolescence, to the age of like 16, 17, 18, I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that we are living in a society that is very fast paced, that has access to information widely available, and if we don't protect and safeguard our children, then they're going to do things that they shouldn't be doing, and we'll be to blame if we don't safeguard them. So if they have that instinct and it's very strong in them and they can't curb it and control it, then marry them, get them married, because it's going to at least kind of allow them to fulfill certain desires within a halal way. Otherwise, you're going to find them doing haram things. And if they can withhold that, and if their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is strong, that's fantastic. That's great. They can be patient. They can fast. They can refrain from certain things and activities and social gatherings. But we know that we're bombarded with many things that affect us. From when we switch on the TV, when we walk out into society. So it's a difficult one that we need to think about, and these are things that we need to really kind of like iron out within our communities, inshallah ta'ala.